My name is Martin Mikkos. I'm an SVP at Hewlett-Packard. I was previously CEO of Eucalyptus, which is an open source cloud platform, the only one that's Amazon compatible, and I was CEO of MySQL as well. And I always said, you can pronounce MySQL any way you like, as long as you're a paying customer. So let's talk about innovation here today. And I wrote innovation now for two reasons. One is, we are now going through a shift in the industry which forces everybody to innovate, even those who are not technology companies and those who are not software companies. And also the style of innovation that we must learn from the 25-year-old kids is that it must happen now. We were used to having innovation where we said, okay, let's spend a year or two innovating and then we go to the boss and see if it works. That's not acceptable anymore. Today, you innovate within an hour or two. You do a hackathon, or you go somewhere with your friends, or you try out something, and immediately you are learning something about what you are innovating. Sure, very complex things to create, they take years and years, and we know how long Ross worked on Mule before it started becoming a real big innovation. But still, in this time where things move faster, we have to think about innovation that's in something that can advance in small increments very, very quickly. Not because that would make the innovations any better, but because we learn faster about what works and what doesn't. Peter Drucker defined innovation as a change that creates a new dimension of performance. Very, very important. Many people say we are very innovative, and then they have a 10% increase in something. That's not innovation. Innovation is truly a new dimension. And a great example, as we all know, is the iPhone, which came out with practically no new features, but it combined features in a way that it became a new dimension of performance, and you saw the effects on all the other smartphones at the time. So it's very important to, when we set the highest bar for innovation, it's a new dimension of performance, taking performance into a new direction and into a new world. Then we also know, or we hear people saying, Marc Andreessen said, software is eating the world. And we say, yeah, that sounds cool, but it actually means something, and we should think about what it means. Let's assume that he is right, that software is eating the world. Well, if that's true, then you need to eat software. Meaning, we've had 30 years of commercial software vendors who have held software for themselves and said, we are the makers of software. But now what's happening is everybody is a maker of software. And whatever you do, you can be a government agency, you can be a corporation, you can be a non-profit, whatever you are, your business value is being represented through software. Whatever it is you do, if it is democracy, democracy happens in software. If it is business, it happens in software. Maybe your company builds giant machinery that needs to be produced in a factory. But most of the designs and plans and optimization happens in software. So that's why we have to, all of us, innovate within software, because that's where we have the opportunities going forward. And that is why we have to look at software companies over the past decade or two and see how did they do it. Because software companies have been training at this for a long time, whereas regular companies, users of software, haven't. You have been innovating in other areas. And now it's time to innovate within software. So here's my definition of what's important with innovation. One is that innovation always happens in some sort of encounter. Somebody steps over a line that nobody else had stepped over. By combining people who didn't speak to each other before, combining technologies that didn't work together before, combining concepts that were seen as incompatible, or some sort of encounter of something. And most of the time it's serendipitous, meaning it happens by chance to the ones who keep trying and trying and trying forever. So that's an important aspect. Number two is, the best innovations happen in open ecosystems today. Now, there are many innovations that happen in closed ecosystems, and somebody can come up with an innovation all on his own or her own. But with the number of people we have on the planet today, quantity beats quality. Whatever you are doing, there's always a smarter kid somewhere out there who already did it. So therefore, the best innovation happens when you open it up and you allow others to participate. Because you can never know where the next innovation comes from. It can come from Myanmar or Bolivia or Iceland or wherever. And by opening up the ecosystems, you just have a much higher chance of innovating. And thirdly, you must have low experimentation costs. When you ask people to innovate, you must make it really cheap so that they can do it without the boss getting nervous. So specifically then in the technology era that we are in now, what is this thing? We talk about the era of cloud. And we are coming to a state where what we build is much more composable than it was before. Traditional IT was giant monolithic things like nuclear power plants, and you could deal with them just as one thing, and they were very rigid and optimized for a specific purpose. Now, resources are more granular, meaning smaller and more polished. They are moving and reassembling faster. They are enabling diversity and producing diversity. You know, I grew up with a LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You could build anything on it. Today, there isn't a kid that builds a web application with just one database. They have multiple databases. They have MySQL and then a NoSQL database and a full text search and then a main memory cache on top of that. That's 4 database engines just for one application. And then most of this is made available as a service so that we can move faster. So that is the era where we are and which is putting the constraints and the framework for our innovation work, whether we are a software vendor or a user of software. In a grander scheme of things, you can see how the world of IT has gone in cycles. It all started with mainframes, we had minis, then came client server, and so on. And for each of these steps, we saw a sedimentary effect, meaning the old stuff is still there. It just is being sedimented at the bottom, and all the growth is in the new stuff. And you innovate in the new waves, and those waves create winners. The client-server era, Microsoft was a startup back then. Microsoft, Intel, Oracle, others became the winners of that era. And then we got into the web era and the open source era, and the winners were Red Hat, MySQL, Google, Yahoo. And now we are in the early days of the era of the cloud, and the winners are at least Amazon and Facebook, but others as well. And the company that's hosting this event is on a very strong path to be a key provider of the infrastructure that you need, the software infrastructure. Note on the left my scale of users. It's a logarithmic scale. So every step up means 10 times more people using, 10 times more users. And this affects innovation in the sense that back in the mainframe days, it was about 1 million people, maybe fewer, who ever did anything. It was a very exclusive group. You didn't need an open ecosystem because there were so few people. You didn't need agility because there was time to do everything. But today, we already have, how many do we have on the internet? 2.8 billion in the whole world? And it's growing towards 100% penetration. And we get there, Internet of Things will take penetration even higher. So the sheer number of users and devices that we have on the systems is setting these requirements on us on agility and innovation. We must deal with a completely new set of things. We can't know everybody in the industry anymore because it's so large. And the software industry is sort of exploding into everything in the world. And specifically, when you look at the 3 last trends and you say, what was the conceptual thing that drove innovation then? The interesting point is they all opened up an ecosystem for people. As an open source guy, I used to look at Microsoft as a very closed company, and I think it's true when you come to software. But if we are honest with them, together with Intel, they opened up the hardware. They opened up the x86 architecture. Before that, you couldn't get access to a unified platform that easily, but they did it. So they opened up x86. Then 15 years later, open source came and opened the source code. And that enabled a huge explosion with Google and Yahoo and all eBay and all those players. So the source code was the dimension of openness and the dimension of value that was created. And now I believe that in the cloud era, and this I said 5 years ago when I joined Eucalyptus, I said, I have a sneaky suspicion that it's something new that now will be the open ecosystem. And I believe it is APIs. APIs in the broad sense of the word, not just application programming interfaces, but programmatic access to resources. So today, to be a winner, you need to play an API play. You need to open up APIs to the world and build that open ecosystem so that people can innovate and find those new things that nobody thought about. And we know it today with developers. They don't ask for a server anymore. They don't even ask for a LAMP stack. Boy, we were so proud when people downloaded the LAMP stack and we said we have 50,000 downloads per day. There still is 50,000 downloads per day, but the key is not the LAMP stack even anymore. Developers say, where are my APIs? You recruit a new developer in the company, they walk in and say, okay, give me some APIs so I can start working. They don't say, give me a server or give me a LAMP stack. And if you are a boss of all of this, and even if you don't care about technology, you need to stop asking every morning, where are my servers? Or where is my IT? You need to ask, where are my APIs? Who is managing them? How are they working? What's the volume? What's the security? What's the functionality? Who is in charge of them? And managing APIs is managing innovation and managing even the operation of a business. So it's a new thinking that has come in. And I'm sure at some point, the era of the cloud will be deemed completely obsolete and old-fashioned, and there will be a new technological era, and then openness will be brought to yet another level. What it is, I don't know. Somebody, I'm sure, will have a vision on this. But this is how we see technology evolving. So back to innovation. There's such a simple recipe for innovation. Joi Ito said it. Do you want to increase innovation? Lower the cost of failure. This means make it so granular that you can create something quickly and test it immediately, and so that when you fail, you know it so soon that it didn't cost you much in money. But secondly, remember that we are human beings and we have a human cost. So as a leader, you must make it acceptable for people to fail, because otherwise they will never have good ideas. Again, we can learn from the kids. There's a company called Supercell, a gaming company that grew from 0 to 1.5 billion in revenues in 3 years. Huge. How many employees do they have? 150. That's pretty impressive. What do they do with failure? The problem with gaming companies is that they develop a lot of games that never succeed. At Supercell, when they have success, they don't celebrate. When they kill a game, they bring out the champagne. So the CEO is sending a very clear message to everybody that failure will be celebrated. And what happens? All these developers are happily developing new games, and they don't mind when the games get killed. So that company learns faster than any other company. And if there's a game that is wonderful formally but doesn't get traction in the market, they kill it, they bring out the champagne, they drink and celebrate, and that was a failure that they covered, and they move on. And with 150 people, they have 1.5 billion in revenues. Try to beat that. So it's about lowering the cost of failure on all aspects, not just the physical, technical cost, but the mental cost. Make it okay to fail and celebrate failure. I know it's easy to say and it's very difficult to do, but please do so in your organization. When somebody fails, lift that person up on a pedestal and say, here was a brave person who did something which had a low chance of success, and it didn't succeed. But the person had courage to do so. And today, it is all about the APIs. And like I said, APIs meaning many things. A programmatic access to resources. It can be access to algorithms, in which case it's programs. It can be access to data, and it can even be access to transport, meaning networks. And you deal with that, all of that through APIs. And they are the connective tissue of your cloud deployments today. And remember that your cloud deployments is your business. Your business value is in the computer systems that you operate, no matter who you are. Agriculture, anything. It's more and more in the IT systems. And managing APIs and the life cycle of the APIs and the performance of the APIs, that is now a mission-critical function in an IT environment. We used to say that the operating system was mission-critical and the database was mission-critical. And then we have added more things. Today, the machine that takes care of your APIs is a mission-critical piece of your infrastructure. And fortunately, with APIs, if you're smart and skilled, you can connect back to your old legacy systems as well, because who doesn't have them? Well, a gaming company like Supercell doesn't have legacy systems, but most other organizations do. So this is a lot of detail, but I thought I should list what I believe is a cloud deployment. I use cloud here to mean a new architecture of deploying computational power. I don't necessarily mean public cloud. You can use the public cloud, you can use a private cloud, you can use a hosted cloud, you can use a managed cloud, you can use a cloud in a backpack, you can build a hybrid cloud. All of those are implementation and deployment details that's up to you, and they are functions of your finances and your security requirements and so on. But cloud is an architecture in which we develop new things and in which we innovate. And like I said, it's more granular. We are now building microservices and building things out of microservices. And we're using containers and virtualization, but containers even more so, smaller and more granular. And this granularity has to do with the fact that when we shift into new technology, things are uncertain. And when you are uncertain and there are many paths to take, you slow down and you say, okay, where should I go? And you test one road and then you come back if it was the wrong one. So it's the fact that we are going through a shift that forces us to learn quicker. Somebody here will say, Martin, old waterfall method, rigid system, monolithic systems, much more efficient, much more focus on producing value and not just checking and learning all the time. It's very true. We pay a price for continuous delivery. We pay a price for DevOps because we are constantly asking, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? That's the price we pay. But in these years that we are now living, it's more important to be able to change course fast than to drive at the highest speed. Maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, everything will be so clear that we go and focus on just one direction, and then the raw speed will be, or sort of the productivity is number one. But right now, the number one key to success is ability to learn and adapt. And if we believe Darwinism, then actually that is an eternal winning strategy. Because Darwin said that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent who will win, but the one most adaptive to change. Banana flies and others, they adapt very quickly. It's also a more diverse world. We have more programming languages than ever before, more databases than ever before, more everything than ever before. It's more open. It's much more interconnected with external systems. Again, in a traditional enterprise, you had a perimeter and people walked in through the gate and they checked in with their cards, and you had employees and non-employees and your systems and their systems. Today, it's a much more porous world where any business system is dependent on services from another vendor that come in through an API. So you must manage the external relationships as much as the internal ones. And the deployment of all of this, therefore, is much more complex and demanding than before, because we do continuous development, continuous deployment. It's API-based. We try to automate it, and we try to programmatically manage deployments. Now we can look at AWS and look at their Lambda service. And I don't know how many of you use it, and it sort of doesn't matter, but you should look and say, if they are developing a Lambda service for AWS, it means that a similar requirement will exist in every enterprise some years from now, meaning the need to manage your deployments in a programmatic, systematic way. And so on. Other things that are important are listed there. And the bad news for developers, if we say software is eating the world, But software is not the most difficult part anymore. If all of this, what I'm telling you, is true, then architecture and design is much more difficult. So sorry, developers, you are amazing and you are creating amazing algorithms, but if we have a world that is composable and consists of small granular things, then building the architecture is the most difficult challenge. And I think for many of you, that's where you hit the wall. You go into this and you do DevOps and you try to connect things, and then unexpected problems occur because you realize that you should have had an architecture that allowed for your priorities. A very important part of the new cloud world and innovation here. But if you can do that, you will be more agile. And agile meaning being able to change fast without advance notice. Sure, it's good if you can plan, but agility means that you can change quickly and learn quickly. It's every business manager's dream to have a business that's very well managed and predictable, and you don't want to change all the time because people get confused. But yet you need to have the agility to make changes when there's a need to make them, and make them very quickly. So I took two examples of what agility means in my mind. One was at a gathering for some of the most experienced and advanced cloud experts in Europe. They met at the Monkey Gra event, and one guy there said, "I believe that one wrong decision is better than 3 meetings." Wow. One wrong decision, not one right decision, one wrong decision. So you say, okay, did they drink too much beer? There's actually a good rationale behind this. If you are agile and you make that one wrong decision, then you will very quickly learn that it was wrong, and you will fix it. And those guys doing the meetings, they are on their second meeting, and they have still one more meeting to come. So this is scary for anybody who is trained in proper management and orderly governance of things. That here, if you believe in this, you must be erratic and you must allow bad decisions to happen and you must lower the cost of failure. It sounds very unintuitive. And of course, no business will succeed without having very sort of managers and leaders who know what they are doing. So, it's easy to put it up here on a slide, and then reality is much more complex. But there's a very deep truth here in the fact that when things are in flux as they are now, and they are changing, and we don't know where it's going. I mean, we present visions, but there are more visions than there are possible futures. Then you have to learn very quickly. And that means that even a bad decision, a wrong decision, isn't as bad as tying up people in meetings. Because in a meeting, you have many people. The wrong decision was perhaps made by just one. Adrian Cockcroft, who is now with Battery Ventures, he was cloud architect at Netflix. And Netflix is perhaps the most modern and advanced users of cloud architectures in the world. They run it on a public cloud, but it could be applied to any sort of environment. And he talks about MTBIMSH, meaning the mean time between idea and making stuff happen. That to him is agility. Okay, ideas can be bad, ideas can be good, but don't worry about that. Again, a wrong decision is okay. But how fast can you go? If you say, it would be cool if we connected this system to this system, how fast can you test it out internally or in an A/B test or something? That is agility. And for traditionalists, we would think in months and quarters, and we would ask for budget approvals and get sign-offs from all kinds of people. And in a fast-moving gaming company or other, they just do it. And then they make a mistake, and then it's a wrong decision, and then they fix it. And of course, a gaming company doesn't protect proprietary information about citizens or medical information. So there's a difference in style. But we must learn from the kids, because they are growing up with this, and many of us did not. We grew up in client-server and with LAMP stacks or even mainframes and minis. So to summarize then, if you say, okay, how do we build for innovation and agility in this era now of the cloud, where cloud can mean any deployment type, but a certain type of architecture. Here's my five pieces of advice for this. Number one, get your infrastructure somewhere. Get real infrastructure or as a service, up to you. Infrastructure is one word. You should get it from one vendor. You're done. It's a pretty straightforward thing. Number two, establish a flexible API-centric software architecture. When I was CEO of MySQL, I would have said build a LAMP-based application, but that's old world. Build an API-centric architecture. Very difficult. You have to choose the components and decide how you scale and who gets to do what and where do you draw the lines of security and access and many things. It's not easy, but that is key to success here. Then number three, don't forget about your existing legacy systems. Make sure they work and work in a very good way. You can't abandon your mission-critical stuff just because you are excited about APIs and innovation and failing and making wrong decisions. So do that. But then number four, open up experimental areas. Ideally, open up outside of your company so that you get this open ecosystem of innovation where you can try out software development and service integration. And when you do this, learn from Steve Jobs, who said, when you create a new product, start with the user in mind. Start with the user experience, and from there go back. Developers don't like to do that. They start with the complex algorithms, and then they force the end users to take whatever comes out of there. But now, as software is eating the world, and you will be eating software, you don't have to repeat the mistakes that ISVs made. You can develop software starting from the end user experience and backtracking. And then number five, very important, manage the life cycles of these services. There are multiple life cycles. They're difficult to manage. The whole notion of version numbers is being thrown away because we can't have version numbers anymore. So having an audit trail of what you did and what was where and what was in force at a certain time and how do you make different products work together, that's a major, major undertaking again. But by managing them, you get longevity for what you're doing. And when you do this, then you can be extremely innovative. You build it on APIs, and you create that value that you now must create. Not just being a growth company, but even just a regular organization, a government agency. You must innovate, not because you have a need to grow, but because the world is changing and the demands on you will change accordingly. So with that, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.